You're tuning in to The Deep Dive. Today we're really zeroing in on something big for anyone thinking about studying in Australia. There's talk, serious talk, from the coalition ahead of the next federal election that's May 3rd, 2025 about, well, quite significant changes for international students.
That's right. We've been looking through the news reports, the pledges they've made, and it really does point towards a potential shift, a big one, in how Australia approaches international education.
So our mission here, for you listening, is pretty clear. We want to unpack what they're actually proposing, understand why they're proposing it, and crucially, hear the reaction from the education sector itself. Basically, what could this all mean for Australia? And, probably most importantly for many of you, what could it mean for your plans if you're hoping to study there? Let's dive in. What are the core proposals on the table?
Okay, so the main headline grabber is this idea of an annual cap. They're proposing a limit on new international student arrivals. The number they've put out is 240,000 students per year, max.
240,000. And how does that compare to, say, what the current government Labor has suggested?
It's actually lower. Labor's number was, I believe, 270,000. So the coalition's proposal cuts that by 30,000.
Okay, a tighter cap then.
Yeah.
And how would that 240,000 be split? Does it affect all types of institutions equal?
No, they've broken it down.
Okay.
The plan suggests a maximum of 115,000 places, new places, that is at publicly funded universities.
Right, the traditional unis.
Exactly. And then the rest, so that's 125,000 places, would be spread across the VET sector, vocational education and training.
Like THIs and similar places.
Yeah, the more hands-on, skills-focused courses, and also private universities and other non-university higher education providers. So a slightly larger slice for that combined group.
Interesting split. Okay, let's talk money, because that's always a huge factor. Visas. Are there changes proposed there?
Oh, yes. This is where it could get, well, significantly more expensive, particularly for some students. The coalition is putting forward a, frankly, substantial AUD $5,000 visa fee, but it's specifically for students applying to the group of 8 universities.
Wow, $5,000 just for the visa application, for those top U8 unis.
That's the proposal. Those are the big research-intensive ones, so a premium fee just to apply there.
That's a lot, on top of tuition and everything else. What about the general student visa? Is that changing too?
It is. They're also proposing to hike the standard student visa application charge up to AUD $2,500.
So even if you're not aiming for Ju8, it's still getting more expensive across the board.
Looks that way, yeah. A pretty significant jump for everyone.
And I heard something about making it harder, or maybe more costly, to switch courses once you're already in Australia.
You did. That's another part of it. If a student decides to change their education provider after arriving and starting their studies, the coalition wants to bring in a new charge for that too, another AUD $2,500.
Huh. So less flexibility, perhaps? Or at least a financial disincentive to change your mind once you're there.
It certainly seems designed to, manage not just who comes in initially, but also maybe reduce that movement between different institutions later on.
Okay, let's just pause there. So we've got overall caps, quite a bit lower than Labor's suggestion, higher visa fees generally, a really big extra fee for the top universities, and another fee if you want to switch providers. That's quite a package. What's the rationale? Why are they pushing for these, well, pretty drastic changes?
The main reason being put forward very explicitly by the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, is the housing crisis.
Ah, okay. That's been a huge issue in Australia.
Absolutely. He stated directly that these limits, these caps on student numbers, are, and I quote, crucial to addressing the housing crisis.
So the thinking is, fewer international students means less demand for housing, which might help ease prices and availability.
That's essentially the argument they're making. It's also worth remembering, context-wise. The coalition was critical of Labor's earlier attempts to manage student numbers through something called the ESOS Amendment Bill. They felt it didn't go far enough.
Right, I remember that. They thought Labor wasn't being tough enough on the numbers.
Exactly. So these new proposals, you could see them as the coalition doubling down, taking a much stronger stance consistent with their previous criticisms. That's the why from their perspective.
Okay, that makes sense in terms of their positioning. But proposals like these, especially hitting the international education sector, which is so valuable to Australia, they must have caused a stir. What's the reaction been like?
Oh, the reaction has been swift and pretty fiercely negative from the sector. Let's start with the group of 8, since they're targeted by that big visa fee. Vicki Thompson, their chief executive, has really slammed the idea.
What are her main objections?
Well, firstly, she points out that Australia already has the highest student visa fees globally, so adding another $5,000 specifically for the top research universities. She says it sends a negative and damaging message. It basically makes Australia look unwelcoming, especially to the high-caliber students these universities attract.
The kind of students who might stay and fill skills gaps, presumably?
Precisely. She questions the logic. Why put an extra barrier in front of the very students who can contribute most to Australia's economy and address those skills shortages? She used the phrase beggars belief. Her worry is it could actually drive away top talent, push them towards competitor countries, a sort of reverse brain drain instigated by Australia itself.
That's a strong warning. What about the broader sector, the International Education Association of Australia, IEAA?
Phil Honeywood, their CEO, he's been just as critical, if not more so. He's really hit out at the lack of consultation. He says nobody talked to the stakeholders before dropping these caps and what he called outrageous visa charges.
So blindsided, basically.
Seems that way. And he echoes Vicky Thompson's point about that $5,000 fee. He called it an appalling message. He's worried it'll simply make students think twice about Australia and look elsewhere. He specifically mentioned the UK and New Zealand as potentially benefiting.
Right, countries competing for the same pool of students.
Exactly. But Honeywood went further. He really questioned the whole premise, the data being used to link international students directly to the housing crisis. He said the data is questionable and unverified, and specifically mentioned a lack of proper analysis connecting rent hikes to student numbers.
So questioning the core rationale we discussed earlier.
Yes. He even, quite pointedly, suggested Dutton might be playing a Donald Trump anti-migration card for political gain before the election.
Wow, okay, that's a very direct political accusation. And Universities Australia, the peak body for all universities.
Lou Sheehy, their CEO, also voiced deep concern. His angle was slightly different, but equally worried. He warned that both major parties, with these kinds of restrictive measures, risk biting the hand that helps fund our sector.
Referring to the economic contribution.
Absolutely. He reminded everyone that international education is worth around AUD $50 billion annually to the Australian economy. So there's a real fear about the economic hit these policies could cause.
Okay, so let's pull this together for someone listening, maybe weighing up their options for studying abroad. We've got the proposals caps, much higher fees, especially for top unis, fees for switching. We've got the rationale, mainly the housing crisis. And we've got this really strong backlash from the education sector. What are the key takeaways, the implications, if these coalition policies actually happen?
Well, the first and most obvious one is cost. Starting in Australia, particularly at a Jesuit university, could become substantially more expensive purely because of that visa fee hike. And the general visa fee increase affects everyone. It just makes the whole proposition less financially viable for some potential students.
Right. You might just price some people out of the market entirely.
It could, yes. Secondly, the caps. Fewer places available overall means more competition. It might become harder to actually secure a spot, even if you're academically qualified.
So potentially more selective, just by virtue of numbers.
Potentially, yes. And then there's the perception issue, which both Thompson and Honeywood raised. There's a real worry this damages Australia's reputation. Is it still seen as a welcoming, open country for international students if policies like these come in?
That could have long-term consequences, couldn't it, if students start favoring other countries?
Definitely. We might see a tangible shift in student flows, maybe towards the UK, Canada, maybe New Zealand, like Honeywood suggested, if Australia seems less appealing or more difficult to get into.
And finally, that point about the housing crisis. It sounds like the link isn't universally accepted.
No, it's definitely contested. While the coalition presents these measures as a solution to housing pressure, voices like the IEAA are saying, hold on, where's the concrete proof? Is this the real driver or is it being overstated? So whether these policies would even effectively solve the problem they claim to target is, well, still very much up for debate.
It really paints a picture of a complex situation. Potential impacts on individual students' finances and choices, but also on Australia's economy, its global reputation in education. It's a lot to consider.
It really is. These aren't minor tweaks. They represent quite a fundamental questioning of the role and scale of international education in Australia.
Okay, so just to quickly recap for everyone, the coalition's pre-election pitch includes capping new international students at $240,000 year-a-lay, a big $5,000 visa fee for Go-8 applicants, a $2,500 general visa fee, and a $2,500 fee for changing providers. The stated reason is tackling the housing crisis, but the international education sector has reacted very negatively, raising concerns about costs, fewer places, Australia's welcoming reputation, and even questioning the data behind the housing argument.
It's a set of proposals that could genuinely reshape things for prospective students and for Australia's education landscape for, well, quite some time.
Absolutely. Which leads us to a final thought, really for you, the listener, to mull over. Given these proposed changes, the higher costs, potentially fewer spots, the debate around how welcoming Australia might seem compared to others. If you were choosing where to study internationally right now, what factors would suddenly become most important to you? It's definitely worth reflecting on your own priorities as this situation unfolds. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.